Alright, so some ordinary gamers, who's otherwise known as Mutahar, had a video made about him by the YouTuber Nicandros, who in that video criticized some ordinary gamers for calling himself an engineer despite not having a formal degree, and also some other inconsistencies regarding what some ordinary gamers did for work outside of YouTube. And then some ordinary gamers responded to this in this video. And now Nicandros himself has responded to some ordinary gamers' response by uploading this new video titled, "This wasn't Mutahar's first time." And so now, let's watch a clip from this video.
By the way, it does seem to be the case that merely holding yourself out to the public as an engineer is a violation of the law in Ontario where Mutahar lives, as Professional Engineers Ontario, a self-regulatory body, not a random engineer labour union, has fined a in 2016 for introducing himself as an engineer on television when he wasn't a licensed engineer. Do note that this person used to be a fully licensed engineer, degree-holding professional engineer, but because he was no longer licensed, he lost the right to call himself an engineer. There is no jail time for breaking this law, only a fine if you refuse to cease misusing this protected title. Despite admitting at points that he was a former engineer, that he was a dropout, Mutahar was introducing himself as an engineer as recently as June of 2025.
Alright, so as you saw in that clip right there, this is some pretty serious stuff, because in the original video that Nicandros put out, he did make this point about, not being an engineer in Ontario in terms of being a licensed engineer and having formal education related to that and still calling yourself an engineer, and how there's this organization named Professional Engineers Ontario that will then penalize you if you do that. And in this video by Nicandros, he gives this example of a person who was actually charged by the Professional Engineers Ontario organization for saying that he was a professional engineer or an engineer, and then, the situation was that he didn't actually have a license at the time that he said that, even though this was someone who had a degree related to engineering, and also previously he had had that license between 1995 and 1999. However, after that, his license was cancelled. And so, when he made those statements, he didn't have it. And for this, they ended up charging him. So, it just goes to show just how serious they are about people using that title of engineer. Even someone who in the past was eligible to use that title publicly, that person, was no longer able to do it now, because he just didn't have the license now. So for that, they were like, what, we're going to charge this person. And this person was in a situation where they had formal education related to engineering, and then they also had the license for it in the past. And then compare this to the situation that Mutahar's in, where he himself has said that he was pursuing an engineering degree, but then he dropped out. And in the video, the clip that I showed you earlier, you can actually see that there's this text that Nicandros shows on screen, so it gives the details of that example that Nicandros is sharing. So you can read that text if you want all the details. But yeah, overall, this situation is something that can cause a lot of problems for somebody in terms of the financial cost of it. And so yeah, if this is something that Mutahar himself is charged with, it's gonna cost him. And now keep in mind, in the response that Mutahar made, in the end of the response segment of that video, he did mention how, if there's any legal problems to come out of it, then he's gonna have lawyers to handle that situation. And so yeah, he is accepting that reality that this might be something that actually gets to that point, to the point that lawyers will have to be involved. But of course, the good thing about this is that the penalty for getting charged in this situation is purely just a fine. So it's a monetary cost and not anything else. Now real quick, I'd just like to say that it would really help me out if you would subscribe to the channel, because I am trying to grow this channel, and so subscriptions truly do help with that. Now anyway, back to the video. Alright, so now that we've discussed that, let's take a look at another clip from that same video that Nicandros posted that the first clip was from.
He's been, among other things, misappropriating a protected title for a decade to come across as more authoritative to his audience. He's been lying to them for 10 years.
Now, if you feel offended, if you feel wronged,
every little thing, from the visuals to the word choices, is him dodging accountability and attempting to downplay it. Hey look, I'm in on the joke, ha ha ha. Look at these videos where I'm looking at code and computer code looking things. I must be pretty advanced. Apparently I'm a dropout without any higher education that an engineer would have. I don't know why that's relevant. He claims he doesn't hide it, but this has called himself an engineer like 70 times, while he's revealed himself to be a dropout like 5 times. Your audience doesn't see all of your content.
Alright, so something worth noting here is that Nicandros mentions how Mutahar was using that title of engineer for like 10 years. And so yeah, that's quite a long time. And this repeated use of it for like this extended period of time definitely isn't gonna help Mutahar's case. And also in that clip, Nicandros points out how, in his response, Mutahar used that Team Fortress 2 gameplay of using the engineer class or character, you could say, and he put that gameplay inside his response about that whole engineer thing, right? So, this was just kind of him poking fun at the whole thing, just a little bit of humor right there. But hey, Nicandros didn't like that, and he actually criticized this, and he said that, hey, you're not really taking the situation seriously by joking about it like this. And, I understand why Nicandros is saying this, because, he put together like this really like long video with all this research and stuff like that. And, of course, when somebody does that, they want a very serious response, So I do understand his perspective, but, personally, to be honest, like, I did find it to be funny. Like, when, I saw that in the response, he picks the engineer class in Team Fortress 2. So I thought that was funny, I will admit. So yeah, I personally liked it. And I think Mutahar might actually even embrace this whole thing. He might embrace the meme, sort of. It might become like this running joke on his channel, or like, within his community, to, not mention the E word, because that was something that we saw in like the comments of like the videos regarding this. People were kind of making fun of this whole situation by referring to the word engineer as the E word, as if, it's some word that you can't say. And so, it kind of became this meme. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but, honestly, like, it could become like this kind of permanent meme, It could be related to like the Team Fortress 2 character as well, Maybe people will post some picture of him and like it'll be this inside joke. Like, hey, if you know, so it'll just be like a picture of Mutahar and then the Team Fortress 2 engineer. And so yeah, if you get the context, it'll be funny, and everybody else is just going to be confused about it. And also in that clip, Nicandros mentions this thing where he's not happy about how Mutahar mentions that he's an engineer or presents himself as an engineer many times. However, he only mentions that he's a dropout very few times in comparison. So he doesn't like that, and he thinks that, hey, the fact that it's not really as talked about and the fact that it's not mentioned as much, that's a problem. And it could then, lead people to not really know that, because, unless you're someone who's watching pretty much all the content, and so you happen to stumble across the few times that it was mentioned, you won't know that. So that's the point that Nicandros is making here. So yeah, guys, I thought that those were the 2 clips that were like the most interesting from my perspective, so that's why I wanted to cover them in this video. But yeah, overall, I think that, this situation has definitely like developed a lot more than I thought it would. Like, it could have totally been the case that Nicandros put out that initial video, and sure, people talked about it for a little bit, but then, maybe there was no response, and, like the discussion around it just kind of faded away, and then, business as usual, and no one really talked about it. But instead, Mutahar stopped posting for like, I believe, a week, and after that he uploaded that video after the break, and in that he made that response, and now we have Nicandros' response, And honestly, like, I don't know if this might actually like develop further, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see how this situation develops, or if this is it. But anyways, those were my thoughts on the situation, and now I'm interested in hearing what you think down in the comments below. So leave a comment letting me know what you think, and we can have a discussion down there. And with all that being said, guys, this is Alexi signing out.